Good evening. I'm Clairmonth Featherstone, inviting you to Security Focus. This evening, I would like to touch on a few matters that are not directly related to security, as it were, but are still related to personal security or financial security, not your regular security feature. Several years ago, 15, 20 years ago, I was part of a research team that was doing some work with the UNDP. And in that study, it showed that several Guyanese, primarily youngsters, persons just out of school or just out of university, sought to acquire a vehicle with the first significant money that they would have earned. And the study summarized that from all indications, that was not the best thing to do. And it gave some examples. For example, we saw that many youngsters who bought a car were living in areas that did not allow for the car to go into the yard or under the house. And oftentimes it was parked on the roadway, and they would sleep in a manner that allowed them to listen for the alarm and look through a window, run out on a veranda, and this sort of thing, to see whether it was a dog or a person hitting or jamming the car, grazing against the car, trying to get into the car. And it made for a very problematic existence. But the research also showed that many of these youngsters who sought to buy a car so early in life did so as against a backdrop where their parents, perhaps they might have owned their own home and so forth, and they did so at a time when the parents wanted money to perhaps fix the steps or repair the house, something of the like. It was also done as against a backdrop whereby the youngster was constrained to depend on his parents to assist to carry his other maintenance bills so that he can get sufficient money to pay for this car, because the car was already a second-hand or reconditioned car, and the persons that he would have bought it from wants to be paid in 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years the most, or the bank wants to be paid as soon as possible. And that placed severe strain on the youngster and, as a consequence, the family. The research said that given the paucity of educational and training agencies, institutions, accredited institutions in the country, we were faced with a situation in Guyana, we're talking 20 years or so, we were faced with a situation in Guyana whereby our young people knew where they would eventually end up even before they went into the Technical Institute, the University of Guyana, the Teachers Training College, Nurses Training College, and so forth. They knew that they wanted to go to the US, the UK, they would go to Nigeria, wherever they wanted to go. They actually knew this before they went into the institution. It further stated that several of them knew by the time they would have left the institution, perhaps partway their studies, where they would like to go. So that in the end, we were losing in the vicinity of 75–80% of our skilled manpower by the time the next batch of students were ready to be released from the educational institutions. And it summarized that that was happening because we had too few institutions, too few accredited institutions involved in certain kinds of training, whether it was technical and vocational training, whether it was the training that was offered at the University of Guyana, the Nurses Training College or the Teachers Training College. So, what is the relevance of all of this to what I'm about to say? Most of us want to know how we are going to fit in to the new oil economy. And many in the Afro-Guyanese community are hoping and praying that this oil boom brings something better for all of us. But we need, and I'm talking here specifically about the Africans in our country, we as a people need to stop doing certain things. We continue to go to the university to do sociology. I mean, sociology is a good subject, but we know it is difficult oftentimes to get a job with that. So we do sociology, we do communication. Many of us would have done political science, economics, and several of the areas that we felt we liked or we felt would be able to give us a job, and at least we're living better than the ordinary man. The problem is, social work is another one. The problem is, many of those fields do not equip us for life in the country now, and it will not equip us for life in an oil economy. So what we need to do is pay keen attention to the technical fields, because the country cannot go forward without specialist welders and electricians, refrigeration technicians, and the like, aviation mechanics, and the like. But if we decide that we are going to do sociology, then we may think about specialize in some area. I know a friend who is a sociologist, and he would have done the dynamics of behavior on CCTV cameras, and he's renowned around the world. He has been in that for about 20 years. And so if we choose sociology, then perhaps we need to choose industrial sociology. We need to study people in an industrial setting, create a niche area for ourselves that could be utilized effectively in a modern economy. When I attend graduations at the University of Guyana, you see 600 people graduating out of the Faculty of Social Science. And when you find out 3/4 of those persons who would have qualified the year before are still on the market looking for a job. So if we want to be part of this new economy, a good place to start is to look into areas that we can create a niche for ourselves, irrespective of our qualification, and try to go into an area that is not necessarily going to boom now, but an area that we know come 10 years, come 15 years, we are set to carve out a good living for ourselves, so that we are not placed in the situation that many teachers are in today, where they went into a field feeling, well, I'll always have a job, only to find out in midlife they are no longer comfortable with the chosen career. When we come back, I will address yet another important topic. Please stay tuned. Security Focus is brought to you by Regium International, Northwest Investment Inc., IntelliGuard Specialist Security Services, and the Institute of Security and Public Safety. I was having a discussion with a manager of the MMC security company a few days ago, and she was assisting to enlighten me on some of our company's policies. There is a policy or a subject. So I'll deal with the subject before I deal with the policy. There is a subject, hot button subject, the transition from 12-hour shifts to 8-hour shifts in the security environment. Why transition? Because the 12-hour shift gives you some additional money. It used to provide 2 guards with employment, and the 2 guards would essentially split the pay or salary of the 3rd guard, and thereby earn something more per day, per week, or fortnight, per month, without realizing that what you were essentially doing was burning your candle at both ends. So that the 12-hour shift, the 12-hour per day shift, has always been a very stressful shift. But more particularly, what the 12-hour shifts did was that you practically left home in the nights. So you're leaving home for work, say you're turning on at 7, and you are up at 5, and you're out of your home at 5:30, when it is yet dark, and you're going to work. And when you leave work and you would have signed over, you are practically heading home at night. So you leave at night and you're heading home at night. And such a work regime does not allow for social activities nor the improvement of one's academic standing. Apart from that, the 12-hour night shift does not allow for females, particularly single parents, to be able to aid their children in homework and other scholastic activities. So, those are some of the things that would have influenced the decision to move from 12 hours to 8 hours. Primarily also to improve the quality of life of the security guard and hence keep these debilitative conditions at bay. Akin to that, women in the security industry, those who went off on maternity leave, were placed on a day shift because there are only 2 shifts. Day shift. So you go to work in the day and they put you at a location that you can function at. And because of the 2-shift system, there were persons who preferred the night shift because perhaps they did some other things during the day. So they were more day shifts only. The transition from day shift, from 12 hours to 8 hours, has created some problems where you must now work 3 shifts. And it is not compulsory that they try to give you any specific shift. So women who go off on maternity leave and return to work would find when they return, companies will say to them, we do not have day duties specifically any longer. And they would proffer an explanation. Many times the female cannot understand, and she tends to feel that the company owes her this concession to do this day shift only. And it has been creating quite some problems in the system. So I had this discussion with this manager at an MMC, and she was able to explain the new position. So women who goes off on maternity leave should expect to come back and at least fit in somewhere, either into the intermediate shift if there are no day shifts. And of course, the companies would not allow them to go immediately to the night shift. So I was really happy this week to be able to elucidate that situation and to report here on that matter. There is another issue that I hoped to touch on, and it has to do with the state of corruption. You know, when I started this program, when I thought about this program many years ago, and I spoke with persons in the business sector, the security sector, they would have said to me, it's a good show, but try your best not to touch on a couple of hot button issues. And I said, such as, and he says, well, don't touch on drugs, don't touch on corruption and the like, because those are very thorny subjects and they have the capacity to create a lot of emotion and to step on people's toes and the like. But I want to touch on corruption this afternoon. And I'm talking about corruption in the NGO arena. Most people are comfortable dealing with corruption, say in government, and we see what is going on in the municipality, we see what goes on in business. But the United Nations had put out a document on corruption in non-governmental institutions. And in Guyana, over the last 20 or more years, we have had a situation where many folks who were unable to make do on their salaries tried to make do by pilfering in NGOs, and that has reached disastrous proportion, so to speak. We have a situation where if you set up an entity, that entity should be registered somewhere. And so typically, those entities are either registered at the courts, the deeds, or at the friendly societies. And the Friendly Societies Act provide 36:04 provides a framework for settling matters and for dealing with issues in friendly societies, whether they are cases of fraud, misconduct, what have you. But I have found that over the last 10, 15 years, perhaps because of resource problems, the friendly societies, the registrar's office, so to speak, seem to be faced with a number of problems which prevented them from being able to carry out their mandate properly. I've been hearing a number of stories about instances which occurred in friendly societies, and I have been involved in assisting friendly societies for like 25 years with respect to mediating matters, institutional strengthening, capacity building, and the like. And when we went out to address these matters, there were times when we found feuding and division in these societies, and at times when you try to investigate some of these matters, you were faced with aggression, so to speak. You were faced with near violence. I have seen persons come to meetings at NGOs with guns, ice picks, put wood at the gate, shovels, and all sorts of things. And that seemed to have put a strain on the resources of the friendly societies, because there are so many things showing up in our community-based organizations, and I doubt whether the constituted framework currently in place is able to deal with it. Recently, I had an incident in a society, and I was talking to a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, burdy fellow, 250 pounds, 260 pounds. And I knew him for quite some time. I was talking with him. And he snapped and struck me to the head, moved away, circumvented him, and sought medical attention. And while at the hospital, I was told by a lady that it was only, and this was in December of last year, I was told by a lady who said, it was only a month ago that I was here with a matter where a woman was struck in her face with a piece of lumber that left her with 23 stitches. And what caused her to get those stitches had to do with the fact that she had reported a matter to the Registrar of Friendly Societies, and the persons at the society or person became angry with her. The registrar's office did not address the matter, did not even acknowledge receipt of those communications. And then I discovered that in my case, I was in the identical situation where I would have sent documents to this agency over a 2-year period, again over a 12-month period, and have not received any response from them. So I called them yesterday, and this time I listened properly to what was transpiring in the background and was able to determine that what went on tells me that the agency is not properly resourced, even with training investigators, perhaps a shortage of investigators, perhaps no investigators. And I think what we ought to do is try to see how best we can get volunteers to aid this very important arm of government. We cannot allow a situation to fester where our community-based organizations, the entities that we intend to use to get resources to every part of our country, to break down. We do not want a situation where persons are no longer willing to go to these entities and to do the kind of voluntary work that they enjoy and the kind of voluntary work that will help our country to grow. We must remember that volunteerism happens to be one of the pillars of development, and we must try our best in this country to promote an environment where volunteers and where community-based entities can thrive. I have sincerely enjoyed, as always, being with you and bringing bits and pieces to the fore. I am Clairmonth Featherstone, wishing you an enjoyable rest of the evening. Thanks for watching. Security Focus is brought to you by Regium International, Northwest Investment Inc., IntelliGuard Specialist Security Services, and the Institute of Security and Public Safety.